trying to make sure that people don't have to reach the point that I reached and go through what I went through. You know, there is a better path.
Welcome to the Lush Life podcast. I'm your drinking companion, Susan Schwartz, and I bring you the how-to guide for living life one cocktail at a time. Thanks to my mother's love of martinis, the first words I spoke were shaken, not stirred, and I've been obsessed by cocktails ever since. Together, we'll learn from bartenders, brand ambassadors, distillers, and others why certain drinks are popular in certain cultures, how to make the perfect old-fashioned, when to shake and when to stir, and so much more. Hear that sound? It's time to cozy up to the bar and let the fun begin. If you've just joined us, then you need to go back to the previous episode and start from the very beginning of Tim Etherington-Judge's journey. Before he established Healthy Hospo, the foundation that provides information, advice, and support on mental and physical health for all hospitality professionals, he had been all over the world as a bartender and brand ambassador. Now, in this episode, we find him on his way to Africa via London.
So I took the job, moved back to London, and started work as the first ever Diageo ambassador for Africa.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, when we're talking Africa, do you mean all of Africa?
All of sub-Saharan Africa. So not like Morocco or Egypt.
Again, it's not just one country.
Africa is definitely not one country. It is an enormous continent. You could fit America, Europe, China, and India into Africa and still have space. It's huge.
So how many countries were you dealing with there?
So I visited during my time Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, Botswana, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and then also
And how many in your team?
So I was the only ambassador. Then we had my boss Stella, her boss Jane. We had a lady called Sarah.
So joining you, like you would go alone?
I would go alone, yeah. But there was a team, in the Africa Spirits team, there was a few of us on reserve. And then there were other people who would work with like Bailey's or Johnny Walker, or those things. But it was a super tight team, like super duper. It was the best team I've ever worked with in the corporate world. We would hang out together, do things together. I remember one year we had an Africa Spirits conference. And the big boss had calculated that it was cheaper for us to do it in South Africa than to do it in Slough or wherever they normally do them. So we flew down to South Africa and we did it on a safari lodge, just north of Johannesburg. So you'd be kind of sitting in this room, someone would be talking and they'd have their PowerPoint on and the flipboards and talking important, commercial corporate stuff, and then I'd have to raise my hand and go, "Excuse me, can we just pause for a second?" There appeared to be two lion cubs just rubbing themselves against the back of my legs. Could you just stop? It's two lion cubs. And that we did 5 days. It was just insane. Like you get up in the morning and there'd be like a giraffe outside of your tent, and then before breakfast you'd go on safari and hang out with like cheetahs or rhinos, and then we got back to London and everybody got sick. Everyone got tick bite fever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, from cheetah. I think from the cheetahs.
So it wasn't so cheap to do it down there.
It was an amazing trip. So that job was traveling all over Africa.
So compared with the Indian cohorts, the Indian bartenders, how did you find? I'll use this as a big African, even though every country I'm sure is different. Is the African bartenders of the same, level? Oh,
they're much worse. Much worse. India is far ahead of most of what I found in Africa. South Africa excluded. South Africa, the level is very high now. And there's some amazing bars in Johannesburg and Cape Town now. But going to places like Nigeria,
It's all, I guess, hotel bars?
Lots of hotel bars. Like Ghana was the big surprise. So Ghana is, if you're going to go into Africa, Ghana is the kind of, it's a great first step because it's super safe. It's one of the few countries where I felt very comfortable kind of getting a taxi from the airport. You definitely wouldn't do that. Like Nigeria is the complete opposite of that. But I remember my first time to Ghana, and I kind of landed and we stayed in the hotel and we had a big conference there, and they were like, right, we're going to take you to the best restaurant in Ghana, in Accra. And you're kind of like going, oh, okay, best restaurant in Accra. This isn't going to be great, is it? And yeah, I was expecting kind of like some typical African food and plastic tables and chairs, and probably very unfairly and stereotyping and stuff. And so they took us to this place, and it was a Japanese restaurant. And it was some of the best Japanese food I've ever had in my life. And great cocktails. And you kind of have like one of those moments where you're just like, what the fuck? Like, how am I? What is this? But it turned out these guys had come over, they're partners with the Gorgeous Group, who had done the consultancy and built this restaurant in the middle of Accra. And it was just staggering. And the chef apparently was one of the chefs for the Emperor of Japan. It was one of those moments where you could have just knocked me over with a feather.
Now, was Diageo also including some of these African countries in their world class?
Yeah, so I had to...
Other than South Africa?
Yeah. So one of my jobs was to kind of try and launch world class in Africa. But we ended up just doing it in South Africa. But now they have world class in Kenya. They're trying to do it in Nigeria and also South Africa. And we also did it in the Indian Ocean. So I would go to Mauritius, Seychelles and Reunion. And we had world class there as well. But lots of the other countries are just not at the standard, and we didn't want to just send people so they could be routinely humiliated. Right. You know, if you're going to go, you should go and really represent well. But yeah, it was just such an adventure. Like every trip was an adventure, particularly going to Nigeria. You kind of get off the plane in Nigeria. I remember my first trip. It was just hilarious. So you have to do the security training in London before they let you go to Nigeria. And it basically consists of 2 hours of an ex-SAS Special Forces guy telling you scare stories about Nigeria or about times when people have been kidnapped. So you're like, okay, and now I have to go to Nigeria on my own. A white guy going to Africa. I'm scared. And they give you you get this long email of instructions. So they're like, right, you're going to have someone meet you at the airport. This is his name. Here's his photo. Whatever you do, don't talk to anyone else. Make sure you find this guy, because they tell you stories about the kind of the kidnapping techniques. Right. So what they'll do is guys will turn up. They'll look at all the name boards in the airport. Okay, so there's Judge on that name board. So I'll write Judge on my name board, and I'll make sure that he sees me first, and then we can, that way. So you can't. I'm being super careful. So I get off the plane. And there's a queue for Nigerians and a queue for foreigners. So you get in the queue for foreigners and you snap your passport. And I'm being so cautious because I'm fresh out of this training and I had all these scare stories. And I'm like, right, I've got his number. I called the number, no answer. I'm looking for his photo. And there's just this guy shuffling around in the arrivals hall. Kind of looks a bit like Snoop Dogg's grandfather. He's got his hat on, dressed all in this pimp brown suit. Sandals on, and he's just going, Guinness. It's the biggest Guinness drinking. Guinness. I'm like, maybe that's their technique to, because the Diageo people come here all the time because the Guinness factories. Maybe they're just, they just shout Guinness and someone will turn up, and then they come. So I'm so for half an hour, I'm just standing around minding my I can't see anyone that looks like this. This guy's going, Guinness. So eventually half an hour, I went up to him and I said, are you this person? He's like, yes, I've been waiting for you for half an hour. Did you not heard me? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. So it turns out to be him. Yeah. So then and you've got you got
to change the picture that Diageo has for you.
This is not you.
And if you hear
why didn't you answer your phone?
Right, screaming Guinness, it's the guy.
Yeah. Why happened to all the security training? So then he hands you, you give him like your yellow fever card that you need, and your passport. So he hands it, and they do some things, and then he hands you over to these other people when you get landside. So he like 2 children. They were like so young, and they sign you off, and then there's like 2 security guards, like Nigerian security guards. Like, each one's like 6'7" with AK-47s or M16s. Like, and you're just like, hi, oh my lord, you're big. And then they take you down to the 4x4. You get in the 4x4 and drive off into Lagos. And then the security behind you with so in front of you.
This would make you seem like people outside would go, okay, we know there's someone really important.
Yeah, because there's blue and red flashing lights going on.
Instead of just you come in, you get in, whatever, you find your guy, you go. You know what I mean? This is like alerting people to the fact.
Oh no, they love it because the blue and red flashing lights are going off. So you go through all the traffic because cars just pull over. And then they follow you everywhere. Every time you leave the hotel, you can't leave the hotel without your security thing. So you've got this like guys with guns either side of you. They were more dangerous, I think, than like, we went to a nightclub once, and we're walking along up towards this nightclub, and all of a sudden, bang, and everyone starts running for cover, and the guy's just like fired his gun into the ground. So yeah, that's a bit crazy. So yeah, Nigeria was pretty intense. Had some adventures in Kenya. It's probably the most dangerous country I've ever visited. Got robbed at gunpoint in Kenya of everything I own. Was there when a number of bombs went off. One near my hotel, one near the office. So that was great. So yeah, I did a year and a bit traveling around Africa as their ambassador. And then there was a big restructure at Diageo. And so they were like, oh, okay, so like, we need to restructure the whole thing and everything. So how
were you feeling at that point?
I was loving the Africa team. You know, it's such a strong team.
Okay.
Yeah. I think when you travel a lot like that, and especially when you're away from home quite a lot, you need a really strong team, as I found out a little bit later. And also, quite often you would either travel together or you'd be at the airport lounge and you'd bump into someone from your team or someone from Diageo who was traveling. And then with the restructure, they said that this whole Africa thing is we're cutting the Africa, we're downscaling, but we want you to become the global bullet ambassador. So we're going to create the first global bullet ambassador role, apart from Tom Bullitt, of course, but he's been there from the start.
His name is on the product.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we want you to take that job. Well, they gave me a choice. They said, you want to be Don Julio or Bullitt? And I was like, definitely Bullitt.
So what really would be the difference between someone who's a brand ambassador for, say, Sub-Sahara to global?
So the change from the Africa job was the full reserve portfolio. So it was like Kettle One, Ciroc, Tanqueray, Bullitt, Zacapa. And then the global was one brand.
So any global brand ambassador is just the one brand? Usually,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was focused on Bullitt, and then when I say global, it was kind of everywhere except the US. In the US, Diageo is its own kind of separate entity. So I looked after all the other markets.
How did you feel about bourbon before that?
I was a big bourbon fan. I used to drink a lot. Rum was probably my favourite spirit at the time, but I was a big bourbon fan, and I really like Bullitt as a brand. So yeah, got to do that, and the reason I jumped at Bullitt was the opportunity to go and work with Tom. It's quite a rare thing where you find such a big brand where the guy who founded it, and it's the name on the bottle, is still involved on a day-to-day basis. And you can find that with small brands, but to find a brand that's so big and so global where that guy is still so fundamentally involved is very rare indeed.
Had you met him before?
No, I never had. My first experience of meeting him was typically Tom and typically hilarious. So I flew to Kentucky with some bartenders from the UK on a brand trip. And you kind of land at the hotel, and the first meeting of Tom is you have breakfast with him. But you have breakfast with him on like a paddle steamer, It goes up and down the Kentucky River.
You get the old Sal experience.
Yeah, it's hilarious. So we go down there and he's like waiting. And you're like, hi, Tom, I'm Tim. He's like, hi, Tim, I'm Tom. And he's such a charming Southern gentleman. He's just magic. And we get chatting on the boat and we're talking and he's asking me all these questions and he finds out that I'm quite passionate about cars. And he's a big car guy as well. And we're chatting away about the cars and this and that and the other. And then he just starts fiddling in his pockets. And he pulls something out of his pockets and he's like, Tim, what's this in my hand? And I'm like, well, Tom, it appears to be the keys to your Porsche. And then he just like takes my hand and just puts his car keys in my hand. And he's like, just going to drive me around for the rest of the day, aren't you, Tim? So then I become his chauffeur for the day. Because everyone else gets on the bus and we all go around together, but he's in his Porsche and they're all traveling around my bus. So kind of, I think he begins to regret his decision when I get to his Porsche and I go to open the door of the passenger side. So obviously the steering wheel's on different side. And he just kind of looks and goes like, the steering wheel's on this side. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. So, and then when we pull out as well, then it's on the different side of the road. And he's just like, maybe we're going to die.
He still let you do it though.
Yeah, he's quite dramatic in that. So it was a lot of fun. And so I got to drive him around all day in his Porsche 911. And so that was my first kind of experience with Tom and realizing that he's such a gentleman. Coming from a different time, he's very conservative Southern guy, but super funny, and everyone falls in love with him. And it was a real pleasure to kind of go and work with him on a regular basis to build that brand around the world. We had lots of fun together, and it was kind of quite a punk brand, and it in a big corporate like Diageo to have a brand that was like that. We did what we wanted to do, and we didn't have any money, so we were quite punk, and we made stuff up, and we had creative. We had to. We had to hustle. But the brand outgrew and outperformed anything else at Diageo. The growth was phenomenal. And so eventually people started like, well, how do we, just be more like Bullet? And we're like, well, don't be like us.
Creative.
Yeah. Can we have some of your money and then we can do more stuff? But it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And then was doing that and enjoying it for the most part. But the travel got more and more and more.
And where were you traveling to?
All over the world. So
this is global.
Yeah, lots of markets, lots of European markets. I went to Asia on a few trips.
And when you say travel, is it that you come back to London and rest for a little while, or is it just you're going literally you're going from Japan to China to Nigeria to here to there? I mean, is it?
It depends on the trip. Sometimes you'll just go to a country and then come back. It's like go to Brazil, come back. Sometimes you do like a tour. Sometimes that tour will just be of a region. I might do the Baltics, maybe Russia, because they're all close to each other. Sometimes it's like the beginning of 2016, so when my travel just got crazy. So 8 weeks on the road, but it was like go to the US, do some stuff in the US, fly to Asia, do 6 countries in Asia, so like Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Philippines, India, somewhere else I went. Go back to the US, then to Europe, and back to the US, and it was just like ping-ponging across the world. And then you've got the problems of semi-permanent jet lag, terrible sleep patterns because you're constantly jet lagged. You're always in a different bed every night. I think my record was I stayed in 3 hotel rooms in the same day.
How is that possible?
I still don't remember. I still don't know. You're constantly all you're eating is restaurant food.
So you're staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning. You're never getting any sleep because the flight has to leave at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly. And you're out in bars every night. And as a whiskey ambassador, people think that all you want to drink is shots of Bullet. Eating exclusively restaurant hotel food.
When you can, probably.
Yeah. Or airline food, just the worst kind of foods. Exercise really goes out the window. And no, everyone looks at the global ambassador role and sees the amazing side of it. You get to travel a lot and you get to go to these amazing bars and have these amazing experiences. But one thing that no one really talks about is the huge difficulties, the physical and emotional stress that it puts on you.
And I'm sure it's hard to have relationships.
Oh, really hard.
You're away
really hard.
all the time.
Yeah. Really, really hard. And
so
even
if you
your
haven't
friendships.
even met anyone before in a relationship before, and there's probably, there's no way to meet someone. And if you do have someone, you never see them.
Yeah, exactly. So you end up and because the kind of you are constantly up on stage and talking, and then there's alcohol involved, it's very easy to kind of have a girl in every port, or you just meet someone on that night, and so there's lots of that goes on as well. But it really does take its toll. Because everything or anything that's kind of healthy basically goes out the window, or is very hard to do, and it's very easy to fall into bad habits. And it took its toll on me. I didn't manage. Looking back, I could have managed it much better, but no one had ever told me how. There was no training, or no one ever told me the importance of sleep or good nutrition, or how to manage myself. Mm-hmm. So it was getting gradually worse and worse and worse.
How did you find that? You
just my emotional stability was all over the place. I'd find myself getting very angry and I'm like super chill normally, and find very few things that anger me. But I would get angry and frustrated at like random things. Go to the shop and they wouldn't have the kind of bread that I wanted, so that would ruin my day. Or I'd get really angry because someone sent me like an email with the wrong wording in it or something. And there was more and more of that coming, and less enjoyment of the job. And then had this massive block of travel beginning of 2016. And then there was another restructure, and my boss, who was the same boss from the Africa job, who I adore greatly, was basically told to leave the company. After 18 years, was just like shuffled out the door for no reason that we could really understand. And then her replacement was the complete opposite of her. She's very much a people person, and her replacement was very much a kind of a process person who doesn't really understand the dynamics of a global ambassador. I can see that spider's back. And the importance of having a close team when you spend so much time on your own. As a global ambassador, you are either on your own, kind of like, hey, it's 3 a.m. and I'm in a taxi traveling to an airport, or you're on a plane on your own, or you're in a hotel room on your own, or if you are with people, you're with people that you don't know, so you become very good at making 5-minute friends, or you're with people you might see once every 6 months. So you've lost those bonds that you need with people, those kind of few close friends, because you're constantly away, or you're with completely random people, and that really started to take its toll. And everything was building and getting progressively worse. And then I went to the Athens Bar Show, which is
still representing Bullet.
Yep. So I went to do a Bullet presentation. So that was beginning of November 2016. And that's where it all came tumbling down. So did my presentation. So I had been dating a girl from Athens previously, but we'd broken up in the summer, partly because of the stress of my job and the travel, and I didn't really get to see her, and I wasn't in a good space. And so when I turned up to Athens in November, I was really excited to see her, and she was super busy, and I had expectations which weren't met, which was my fault. So I ended up getting extremely drunk, and just having a massive breakdown, which is the worst one I've had yet. And Diageo told me that, put me on sick leave, told me not to go back to work, and you take a few days off.
Was it that you just didn't do your job? Or
it was a combination of...
Did you yell at people? Or did you just disappear?
I drank so much, I don't have like a great recollection of exactly what happened. But I know enough that it could have been the end of my life. And then the next day, decided to kind of come clean and talk about it. You know, I constantly, for however long that I'd been suffering for, it was constantly like, just put on the mask, don't tell anyone, go out there and smile and pretend everything's great and you have the best job in the world, but don't tell people how you really feel and how difficult this has become and how much you're struggling. So I decided to kind of come clean and tell the world. So in the way that we do in this modern era, through a Facebook post. So I wrote this big long Facebook post. And then work called me and said, we want you to take a few days off work. We're really worried about you. So just kind of get home as soon as you can, rest and do that. But the result of that Facebook post that was the kind of the genesis of Healthy Hospo, I guess. It was the response to that post that really set the kind of wheels in motion for what I do now. And it wasn't the responses that you expect from your friends and family, that it's kind of messages of love and support and help and all that kind of stuff. It was the hundreds of messages I got from people. And I joked with our social media agency that this would be a great strategy for getting good engagement, because I've never had a post that's come anywhere near to be as commented on as this one. But there's hundreds of messages from people who didn't send me messages of love and support, but they opened up about their problems and told me their stories and their struggles and asked for help. And that's what really got me. And it was just like, I'm not the only one here. There's a bigger problem here. There's a lot of people in this industry suffering, and people who I respect greatly and look up to, and was like, these people are incredible. And if they're suffering, because they seem like they've got everything sorted, and if they're having problems, then oh my God, who else is in this industry is really struggling? Thank goodness
you were the bravest to come forward.
I don't think I was the bravest. I definitely wasn't the first. I was just one of some of those people. Maybe I was near the front. So
yes, and people felt that they could open up to you.
Yeah, I think
so. There's something about you.
I don't know.
You may have not been the bravest or the first, but
I think it's a case of,
this person is feeling this way. It's okay.
I think it was a case of people desperately wanted to talk about it. But they didn't know who to talk to, because there's, even today, and we've made great strides, there's still such stigma around mental illness. So you can't just kind of go up to anyone and go like, oh, I suffer from depression or anxiety, or I tried to commit suicide the other day. Whereas you can go up to people and go like, oh, I broke my leg, or I've got cancer. There's no stigma attached to that.
Especially if you're working for a big corporate brand, they could say bye-bye. They could have said that. See you, just like your guy.
Yeah. So I think when they saw someone who openly talked about their struggles, they saw it as an opportunity of like, oh my God, there's someone I can talk to. I'm not special in any way in this situation. I just think that is the case. That they were so desperate to, and it was kind of like opening Pandora's box in a way.
Yeah, of course.
So those 3 days, I was told to take on sick leave, became a week, and then it was talked to the occupational health doctor at Diageo, who's an amazing lady, Dr. Fiona MacDonald, based up in Scotland. So I had a lot of conversations with her. And then a week became 2 weeks, which became a month, which became 3 months, which became 6. And during that time, I decided that I would not only write that Facebook post, but I would start a blog. And I would write about my struggles and my recovery and everything I was going through at the time. And that also helped me kind of build the framework for my recovery. So it really got me to think about how I was going to go through this. So this wasn't the first time I'd been diagnosed. So this time I was diagnosed with severe unipolar depression. And I'd been diagnosed with depression when I was 16 as well. But back when I was 16, and I didn't really know any better. And you have a lot of trust in your doctor. I was put on Prozac, and teenagers should never be given such a hardcore antidepressant. And for 3 years I was on Prozac, and it was a pretty horrible time. And my mum was on Prozac as well, and it's not a great experience. And so this time around I was determined that medication wouldn't be the first resort, it would be the last resort. So I would try everything else first before we got to the point of medication. So I started, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like to do research and teach myself on nerdy things. So I started to really look into it. Like, what can I do to sort this out? This is my problem. This is my illness. I need to own it. And I need to kind of come up with a strategy that can help me deal with this. And the blog kind of helped me write about that and kind of frame it in my mind. So it was a combination.
Were your doctors open to that?
So the Azure doctor was very open to it. It's funny, my first therapy session, so CBT was part of my recovery. I turned up to my first CBT session, and I told my therapist, like, this is how I'm going to do this. And she was like, brilliant. That's okay. Let's talk about the weather. It was a combination of focusing on so meditation became a part of my daily routine. Exercise, so I really I had a lot of time. I was on sick leave, getting full pay without having to go to work. So I had a lot of time to focus on exercise. Nutrition I'd always been interested in nutrition, but it became super focused on that.
All those years when you were traveling, did you keep to being a vegetarian or a vegan?
Yes,
or were you slipping?
Yeah.
So you were always
always
doing that. So it wasn't like you were eating so much beef or meat, or you were always... There
was one
even though your
meal...
eating habits might not have been so great, you still were... you were eating healthy.
But you
in a way.
Well, you can still eat vegan and be really unhealthy. You can survive on a diet of Oreos and crisps.
Yeah.
So...
Somehow I'm surprised Oreos are vegan, but okay.
It's just sugar, though, isn't it?
There has to be something in it.
It's just sugar formed into the shape of a biscuit.
And of course, most of alcohol is vegan too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Although I did get an email once from a guy in Germany asking about this. He found out I was vegan, so they sent me this email, and I found out that a lot of the labels that are glued onto bottles and they use animal-based glues, and a lot of other things. I got super nerdy at one point. Even like the inks they use on the bottles. Who
knew?
Yeah, so kind of came up with like a 10-point strategy for healing myself, and if that didn't work, then we'd look at medication. And that's become a kind of core part of what I talk about as well. And kind of got myself into a really good place. Was not traveling, was staying spending a lot of time with friends and family, cut right back on my drinking, eating really healthily, doing lots of exercise, meditating every day. And then started to kind of have these conversations about going back to work with Diageo, but after kind of 3 months, it became clear that it wasn't going to happen. They weren't willing to make the changes necessary to my role to get me back into that role, and there was no real offering of other roles that were suitable or interested me. So it kind of became clear that I had to leave. And also at the time, there were, my mind started to go towards, can I do something more around the health and wellness? Because after the post that I'd done and kind of come clean about my illness, a lot of people saw me as this kind of person in the industry that was talking about it. And so, and it became much clearer and clearer, and I was forming this idea in my mind about what I wanted to do. So I left Diageo in August last year, and said, right, let's give this a go, rather than stepping straight into another job. I've got an opportunity here. You know, I got a bit of money from leaving Diageo, so I got a buffer that I can take a risk, and I can go and try and do something around improving the health and wellness of the hospitality industry. So one thing I'm okay at is kind of, I can build a website, and I'm fairly computer savvy. So, you know, in an afternoon, I had bought the domain names and signed up all the social media handles and downloaded WordPress and got everything I needed to build a very kind of like basic website. So put up a little blog, had a logo designed as well. So put up a little kind of a very basic blog with a few posts about, you know, an introduction to Healthy Hospo, my 10 things that I did to beat depression, talk about exercise and a bunch of other stuff. And then also have like a help page, so if other people are struggling, here are some organizations that can help you for different countries around the world. And that was quite well received. And then it was planned, so we launched that in 23rd of October. And that was just a very basic blog. And there was always a plan to kind of build a much bigger website. So I was designing that at the time. So then in December, we launched the site, kind of as it is now. It was a little bit different. And then in January, we launched officially with Healthy Hospo. So 15th of January, we had our big launch event in London. So about 100 people turn up, which was incredible, for a 6-hour-long workshop around health and wellness and hospitality. We looked at meditation, sleep, nutrition, exercise. We had an osteopath talking about how to avoid back pain. We talked about better drinking. So rather than drinking less, it's can you create healthy drinks? How can you increase the complexity of sugars that you have in your drinks? How can you reduce the amount of sugar using tricks like cinnamon or licorice? Healthier sugars, raising the nutrition content of drinks. Because one thing that's said with Healthy Hospo is we'll never tell people how to drink or how much to drink. We'll focus on all the other stuff that no one else is really talking about. And we won't be that finger wagging person going, oh, it's alcohol is the cause of all problems. It's like, let's talk about the terrible sleep habits of the industry. Let's talk about the bad nutrition, the lack of exercise, all the other stuff that goes on. And that was really well received. You know, everyone that came really loved it. And it seemed to be something that people really wanted. I mean, it's just grown from there. And
was that your idea that day? Did you feel that this is exactly what I wanted to do?
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to achieve by Healthy Hospo.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the end of it, I had there was some tears at the end. It was I'm sure, such a humbling and such an amazing day to have so many people in the room, such energy and so many kind words at the end of it.
And after being alone for so long.
Yeah, it was it sounds a bit cheesy. It was like I found my thing, my calling. And this is what I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to improving the health and wellness of the industry and trying to make sure that people don't have to reach the point that I reached and go through what I went through. You know, there is a better path. And this is an amazing industry. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to reach the point of having a massive breakdown to realize that you need to change.
Just in my limited experience of the industry, I've never found an industry that has been so supportive.
Yeah.
All of you are such a tight group.
Oh, definitely.
And really want the best for each other. I do find that, of course there's odd ones here and there, but I just feel, as a generalization, I love this industry. I really feel it takes care of itself. And, to have someone like you go into bars or, work with the hires up, work with the man who owned Sweet to say, no, this is not how you deal with it. This is how you should have dealt with it. This is how, every boss should hire you to learn how to deal with this.
Well, I wish they would. I mean, I think part of the problem, one of the big problems is that it's an industry dominated by small business. In the UK, 70% of bars and restaurants employ 10 people or less. So they don't have the HR team. They don't have the kind of bandwidth to be able to spend time designing health and wellness programs. They're so in the trenches just trying to survive day-to-day business and grow their business that it's not part of their radar. So one thing I hope is that we can provide a service for them to kind of help their teams, because if they're the ones most at risk. You know, if you look at health and wellness, if you have 10 people working in your team and one person takes a day off sick, you've lost 10% of your workforce, which is, you know, if a big corporation like Diageo lost 10% of their workforce, that's thousands of people. But if you're a small business, it's a huge impact. So anything you can do to reduce the numbers of sick days taken, improve productivity, improve customer feedback, which health and wellness programs are all proven to do, it's got to be a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
Plus, you've also got this problem at the moment of recruiting good staff. Like everyone I know who's a manager or an owner-operator, their biggest problem is staff. You know, finding good, loyal staff. So if you find those people, you want to kind of do everything you can to keep them. And health and wellness programs are probably the strongest, most proven strategy for keeping good team.
Yeah, I mean, if you hire someone, you spend the time to teach them, and you don't want them to go away. You want them to stay.
Exactly.
And they do become part of a family.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it needs to be.
Yeah, and you need to. So this is what you're doing now.
This is it. Yeah. So it's Healthy Hospo for life. Yeah.
I think that's great.
Thanks. Yeah, I
Should
mean,
we go have a cup of tea?
Sure. Nice healthy green tea. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and we're just getting started. So from the wellness workshop that we did, off the back of that, we are starting to work with brands, work with individuals, work with outlets, taking it all over the world. So it's a global project. It's not just based in the UK. We started here in London because that's just where I was based. But we did a workshop in Edinburgh at Tales the Cocktail on Tour. Last week I was in Amsterdam. We did a full workshop there, similar to the one in London. We've got workshops coming up in Puerto Rico and Dubai. I'm speaking at most of the major bar shows this year about health and wellness.
Yeah, you're going to be at the convent.
Going to be at the BCB Brooklyn, BCB Berlin, Tales of the Cocktail, Moscow Bar Show, Imbibe Live, Barometer in Kiev. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Obviously, you tapped into something.
I hope so.
You definitely did.
It seems
I'm
like
sorry
it,
you had to go through what you did to.
I'm not though. I'm not, because if I hadn't have gone through that, then we wouldn't be sitting here now having this chat, and I wouldn't have come to this realization. You know, it's part of my journey.
So many people.
Yeah, thank you. It's just getting started. There's so many people to help, and there's so much to do. It's looking at all the research that I've done into the health of the industry, and there's not a great amount of very specific research into the hospitality industry, but the Department of Labor Statistics in the US have done a lot of really good work. There's not a positive stat about the industry at all, really.
Someone told me, I think it was you, actually,
possibly,
who said to be a bartender is like the 19th most dangerous thing.
13th.
13th.
It's the 13th most dangerous job in the world. They use a number of measures to measure that, but the big one is workplace mortality. What's really scary about that is that the job that comes 16th on that list is being a police officer. And we all know attitudes towards guns in the US. You know, they're dealing with armed criminals, and yet being a bartender is more dangerous. And you've got the highest rates of drug abuse of any industry in the world, the third highest rates of alcohol abuse. Mortality from alcohol-related disease is more than double average. You've got 60 to 70% of chefs saying that they're suffering from workplace mental illness. You know, a third of chefs saying they have to drink just to get through a shift. The stats are just frightening, absolutely frightening. But it doesn't need to be this way. You know,
you're doing something about it.
I'm trying. Yeah. I'm just one person within a global community. There's a lot of people talking about this now. You know, people like Jack McGarry, Giuseppe Gonzalez, Claire Warner-Smith, who's been doing this for much longer than I have, Camille Vidal. There are more and more people who are starting to kind of take it seriously. And hopefully Healthy Hospo could be part of that story.
It is already.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's a lot of work to do. We've just commissioned the first ever global survey into how the industry sleeps. So if anyone is listening to this, please go onto the website and take that survey. Because we're trying to find out how the industry sleeps. Because sleep is the kind of foundation of good health. If you don't get good sleep, then everything else is not particularly effective. And particularly when it comes to mental health, sleep is vital. But obviously our industry has a terrible relationship with sleep. So we're trying to find out exactly how the industry sleeps, and then once we've got the results of that survey, we can then build like a really strong program to help improve the sleep of the industry. Because the World Health Organization have classed any sort of nighttime shift work as a class 2A carcinogen, which is on the same level as lead paint. And we all know no one would paint their houses with lead paint. We all know that's bad. And this industry is equally as bad for that. And then if you look at the effects on sleep on cardiovascular disease, on diabetes, has an enormous impact on mental health. And you combine that with the general terrible nutrition, the lack of exercise, the excessive drug and alcohol consumption, the social media addiction, which is a very modern thing. It piles up on top. There's not one thing. There's no one magic answer, but we need to kind of start addressing a lot of these different issues. And it's not about changing the industry and making sure every bar is shut at 10 p.m. so people can go home and get and sleep like normal people. It's about looking at the unique aspects of the industry and seeing how we can apply health and wellness initiatives and programs to that. And also just teach people how to look after themselves a little bit better. Eat a little bit better, do some regular exercise. Instead of taking the Uber to work, walk to work. Instead of riding the escalator, take the steps. Instead of having that pizza, have something green, and have something a little bit healthier. Instead of having shots of whiskey, have a shot of vermouth or sherry. And it's about little small improvements. Making sleep a priority. So when you do get to sleep, make sure you're getting the best quality sleep possible. So there's lots and lots and lots to do. So this is a lifelong journey. I'm just absolutely loving it. I've never been happier, and I've never felt more purpose. And I've never felt more out of my depth, and I have no idea how this is going to go or really what I'm doing. I just know that I have to do this. And I know that people will join me along the way, and we'll work it out.
Cool.
No, thank you.
Thank you. It was amazing to hear all of Tim's story, and I thank him so much for always being ready to share it. If you wish to take the sleep survey or have any questions about anything Tim spoke of, please visit healthyhospo.com. So now, it's time for another healthy cocktail of the week. For this week's cocktail of the week, we have an alcohol-free one containing Seedlip Garden 108, created by Charles Roche and Eleanor Holcraft of Liquid Intellect. It's called the Pea and Pine-nut, and it's actually pretty hard to make, but you have to try. You'll need 30 ml of olive oil washed Seedlip Garden 108, 10 ml of green pea and pine nut syrup, 5 ml of agave nectar, 15 drops of malic acid solution, 3 drops of citric acid solution, and 20 ml of aqua faba, which is that viscous water in which legume seeds such as chickpeas have been cooked. So, the method. To make the green pea and pine nut syrup, you blend 120 grams of the roasted pine nuts and 50 grams of green peas and 1 liter of water together. Then put everything through a centrifuge to remove any of the solids. Then make it into a 2-to-1 sugar syrup. If you don't have access to a centrifuge, then use a simple super bag. It should work fine. Shake it dry, then add ice and shake it wet to achieve the perfect aeration. and then double strain into a Nick and Nora glass. It's then simply finished with a few droplets of olive oil on top. I told you it was hard, but it's well worth it. And you'll find this recipe and all the cocktails of the week on lushlifemanual.com, where you'll also find all the ingredients in our shop. Next week is our last week in Nuremberg, where we'll meet the man who revived red beer and has made this city the whiskey capital of Germany. Until next time, bottoms up. Thanks for listening to the Lush Life podcast, the sister of A Lush Life Manual. For more information and links to everything you heard, plus a bit more, please visit alushlifemanual.com. Always remember the wise words of Oscar Wilde. All things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly. Okay, I said that last part. Theme music is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. Lush Life is produced by Terra, and I'm your hostess, Susan Schwartz. I'll see you at the bar.